I woke up on the morning of my surgery to an empty house. The clock read 6:47 a.m. My hands were already shaking, not from fear of the operation, but from the silence that filled every corner of our home. I had reminded them 3 times yesterday. Once at breakfast, once when Dad came home from work, once before bed. The surgery is at 9 a.m. Dr. Morrison said I need to be there by 7:30 for prep. Mum had nodded without looking up from her phone. She was texting someone, her thumbs moving in quick practiced motions. Dad had grunted something that might have been acknowledgement. Only my younger sister Bella had actually responded, though her words still echoed in my mind with their casual cruelty. Can't they reschedule? My recital is tomorrow night, and we still need to do a final fitting for my costume. I had stood there in the doorway of the living room, watching them arranged on the couch like a portrait of a family I didn't belong to. Mum on the left, Dad on the right, Bella in the middle with her dance magazine spread across her lap. The golden child, literally. Her hair caught the lamplight and seemed to glow. Mine had always been mousy brown, unremarkable. It's a tumour, I had said quietly. They need to remove it before it grows. Benign though, right? Dad hadn't even looked at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the television, where some sports commentary droned on. Probably. They won't know for sure until... See? Bella had interrupted, her voice bright with the kind of thoughtless confidence that came from never having to fight for attention. It's probably nothing. My recital is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I'm performing the lead solo. Everyone from the company will be there. Mum had finally looked up then, but not at me. She'd looked at Bella, and her face had transformed into something soft and proud. Your sister's right, Helena. This recital could change Bella's entire future. There will be scouts there, potential scholarship opportunities. Your surgery can be rescheduled if needed. But it couldn't be. Dr. Morrison had been very clear about that. The mass was growing, pressing against nerves. Every day I waited increased the risk of permanent damage. I had tried to explain this, had tried to make them understand, but my words seemed to evaporate before they reached their ears. Now I stood in the empty kitchen, still in my pajamas, my pre-surgery instructions clutched in one hand. No food or water after midnight. Check. Arrive 90 minutes early. Impossible. Have a responsible adult present to drive you home and stay with you for 24 hours post-operation. I laughed, and the sound came out sharp and broken. There was a note on the counter, tucked under the sugar bowl. Mum's handwriting rushed and slanted. Had to leave early to get to Bella's costume fitting. Good luck today. There's money for a cab if you need it. Love you. $20 lay beside the note. I picked up the bill and stared at it. This paper, representation of my worth in their eyes, the cost of their absence, the price of their love measured and found wanting. I called the cab myself. I checked myself in at the hospital myself. I sat in the pre-op room in a paper gown, alone, while nurses with kind eyes and practiced smiles tried not to look at the empty chair beside my bed. Family running late? One of them asked, adjusting my IV with gentle hands. I didn't answer. I just turned my face toward the window where early morning light was beginning to paint the sky in shades of pearl and rose. Bella would love those colours. They were soft and pretty and delicate, like everything in her life, like everything I had never been allowed to be. Dr. Morrison came in, her face creased with concern. Helena, where are your parents? They couldn't make it. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears, like I was speaking from underwater. My sister has a dance recital. It's important. The doctor's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or anger on my behalf. But she was professional, controlled. I see. Well, you're 18 now, so legally we can proceed. But I want you to know that you shouldn't be alone after this. The anesthesia, the pain medication, you'll need someone. I'll be fine. Helena, I'll be fine, I repeated, and this time my voice had an edge to it, sharp enough that she stopped arguing. They wheeled me into surgery. The lights overhead were too bright, too white, burning into my retinas even when I closed my eyes. Someone told me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7 before the darkness took me. I dreamed of dancing, not Bella's kind of dancing, all grace and flowing movements and pointed toes. I dreamed of dancing alone in an empty theatre, my movements wild and uncontrolled, my feet bleeding through my shoes. I dreamed of spinning and spinning until I flew apart, until there was nothing left of me but motion and pain. When I woke, something was wrong. Not with the surgery. I could feel the bandages, the dull throb of healing tissue, but something else. Something fundamental had shifted in the universe, in the fabric of reality itself. I was looking at my childhood bedroom ceiling, the one I'd had until I was 12, with its glow-in-the-dark stars arranged in constellations I'd memorized from a library book. We'd moved when I was in 7th grade, sold that house for something bigger when Dad's business took off. This ceiling shouldn't exist anymore. I sat up slowly, my hand going to my head. No bandages, no surgical site, no pain. My hands were smaller, my arms were thinner, the muscle definition I'd built up from 3 years of physical therapy completely gone. I looked down at myself and saw a body I hadn't inhabited in 6 years. The door burst open and Mum appeared, young and unworn by the years I remembered. "Helena, you're going to be late for school. I swear you're always dragging your feet in the morning." I stared at her. She looked so much younger. The lines around her eyes hadn't formed yet. Her hair was still its natural dark brown, not the chemically maintained blonde she'd adopted when Bella started competing in pageants. "What year is it?" The words came out hoarse, confused. Mum laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. "Did you hit your head or something? It's 2019, obviously. Now get dressed and make sure you're home right after school. Bella has her first regional dance competition tonight, and we all need to be there early." She left before I could respond. I sat there in my childhood bed, in my childhood body, with the full weight of adult memories pressing against my 12-year-old skull. I had died. I must have died. The surgery had gone wrong. Or maybe I'd gone home to that empty house and something had happened. An allergic reaction to the medication. A fall. A complication. It didn't matter how. What mattered was that I had lived through 6 more years, had survived them only to die alone, and unmourned while my family celebrated Bella's triumph. And now I was back. The realization settled over me like a physical weight. I was 12 again. I had 6 years of memories that hadn't happened yet. 6 years of knowledge about every choice, every betrayal, every moment of casual cruelty that had led me to that surgical table, alone and unwanted. I stood up and walked to the mirror. My face looked back at me, young and unformed, still carrying baby fat in my cheeks. But my eyes were different. They held something that didn't belong in a child's face, a deep, weary understanding of exactly how little I mattered to the people who were supposed to love me most. I would not make the same mistakes again. The day unfolded in eerie familiarity. I remembered this morning, this particular Tuesday in March. I remembered rushing through breakfast because I'd overslept. I remembered Mum snapping at me for taking too long in the bathroom, even though Bella had been in there for 45 minutes doing her hair. I remembered Dad not looking up from his newspaper when I said goodbye. But this time, I was calm. This time. I moved through it all with the quiet detachment of someone watching a play they'd already seen. I ate my breakfast slowly, methodically. When Mum snapped, I simply nodded and didn't apologise or make excuses. When Dad ignored me, I didn't try to get his attention. At school, I sat in classes I'd already taken and listened to lessons I'd already learned. My best friend Emily, who would eventually drift away when she got tired of being cancelled on whenever Bella needed something, chatted beside me about some boy in her English class. I listened and smiled, but didn't invest, didn't plan sleepovers that would be interrupted, didn't make promises I knew our friendship couldn't keep. "You seem different today," Emily said at lunch, studying me with curious eyes. "Quieter?" "Just thinking," I said. "About what?" "About dying alone. About waking up in a second chance I didn't ask for. About how I was going to spend the next 6 years protecting myself from people who should have protected me." "Nothing important," I said instead. That evening, we all went to Bella's competition. I sat in the audience between my parents, watching my 9-year-old sister perform her routine. She was good, genuinely talented, even I could admit that. Her movements were fluid, her timing perfect. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. I clapped politely, my hands coming together in mechanical rhythm. This was the competition where Bella would win first place. This was the night that would set her on the path to regional fame in the junior dance circuit. This was the beginning of everything that would eventually consume our entire family. In my first life, I had cheered the loudest. I had been genuinely happy for her, proud of my little sister's achievement. I had celebrated with them at the expensive restaurant afterward, had listened to Mum and Dad gush about Bella's future, had felt a small, persistent ache that I'd pushed down and ignored because good sisters were supposed to be happy for each other. This time, I knew what it would cost me. After the competition, in the restaurant where the waiter brought Bella a sundae with a candle in it despite it not being her birthday, Dad raised his glass. "To Bella," he said, his voice warm with pride I'd never heard directed at me. "Our little star." Mum clinked her glass against his, her eyes shining. "We always knew you were special, sweetheart." Bella beamed, soaking up their adoration like a flower turning toward the sun. "Helena, aren't you going to toast?" Mum asked, noticing my stillness. I picked up my glass of water. I held it up but didn't lean forward to clink it against theirs. "Congratulations, Bella," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. Something flickered across Mum's face. Confusion, maybe, or irritation at my lack of enthusiasm. But Bella was talking again, replaying her performance moment by moment, and Mum's attention swung back to her like a compass finding north. I set down my glass and went back to my meal. Over the following months, I watched my family with the cool observation of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. I saw patterns I'd been too young, too naive, too desperate for love to recognize the first time. When Bella needed new dance shoes, it was an emergency that required immediate attention and money we didn't have. When I needed a new winter coat because mine was too small, Mum told me to make do for another season. When Bella's dance schedule conflicted with my parent-teacher conference, the conference got cancelled. When my choir concert conflicted with Bella's practice, I was told I could miss it. When Bella was tired, the whole house had to be quiet. When I was sick, I was told to take some medicine and keep it down. The difference was that now, I didn't fight it. I didn't beg for equal treatment or try to prove my worth. I simply observed, noted, and planned. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of casual preference. I stored them away like data points in a study I was conducting on parental neglect. I stopped trying to make them notice me. I stopped competing for attention I would never win. I focused instead on myself, on building a life that didn't require their approval or validation. I studied harder, but I didn't bring home my report cards for praise. I joined clubs, but I didn't invite them to attend meetings or events. I made friends, but I never asked to bring them home where they might witness my family's dysfunction. I became a ghost in my own house, present but not participating, there but not really. Mum noticed first. "You've been very quiet lately," she said one evening about 8 months into my second chance. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said, not looking up from my homework. "You just seem distant." I finally looked at her, really looked at her, saw the slight furrow between her brows that suggested she was concerned, but not concerned enough to dig deeper, not concerned enough to actually change anything. I'm just growing up, I said. She seemed satisfied with that answer. Relieved, even. She didn't want to deal with a problem child, not when Bella required so much of her energy and attention. My self-sufficiency was convenient. The years passed. I moved through my second adolescence with the efficiency of someone following a map through familiar territory. I knew which pitfalls to avoid, which opportunities to seize, which battles were worth fighting and which would only exhaust me. When I was 14, the same age when I'd first started having headaches in my original timeline, I went to the doctor on my own. I'd saved money from babysitting and small jobs. I'd researched my symptoms. I'd prepared. The doctor found the tumour early, so early that treatment was simple. An outpatient procedure, some monitoring, a clean bill of health within months. I told my parents afterward, casually, over dinner one night. "Oh," Mum said, "that's good. I'm glad you're okay." Dad nodded, already turning back to Bella, who was talking about needing new competition costumes. I had been diagnosed with a potentially serious medical condition, had undergone treatment, had recovered, and they had barely reacted. The tumour that would have eventually required emergency surgery, that would have grown unchecked until it threatened my life, was gone. And they didn't even ask about the details. But I wasn't hurt, not this time. This time, I had expected exactly this response. By the time I was 16, I was essentially independent. I had a part-time job at a bookstore. I had my own money, my own schedule, my own life. I came home, ate dinner, did homework, and existed in parallel to my family rather than as part of it. Bella was thriving. At 13, she was already being courted by prestigious dance academies. Her walls were covered with medals and ribbons and photos of her in costume, captured mid-leap in moments of transcendent grace. My walls were mostly bare. I preferred it that way. The college discussion happened on a Sunday morning. I was 17, halfway through my senior year, sitting at the kitchen table with college brochures spread in front of me. "Where are you thinking of applying?" Dad asked the first time he'd inquired about my future in months. I looked up at him. "Several places. I'm looking at schools with strong pre-med programs." "Pre-med?" Mom's voice carried surprise. "That's very ambitious, Helena." Ambitious. As if I hadn't maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school. As if I hadn't been president of 3 clubs and volunteered at the hospital every weekend. As if I hadn't done everything possible to build a future that would carry me far away from this house. "I have the grades for it," I said evenly. "Well, yes, but..." Mum exchanged a look with Dad. "We need to talk about finances. Your father and I have been discussing it, and with Bella's dance academy tuition..." "I'm applying for scholarships," I interrupted, "and financial aid. I don't expect you to pay for my education." The relief on their faces was immediate and unmistakable. "That's very mature of you," Dad said. "We're proud of your independence." Independence. What a pretty word for neglect. I got into every school I applied to. Full academic scholarships to most of them. I chose the one farthest from home, a prestigious university on the opposite coast, where I could study medicine and build a life that had nothing to do with the people who had raised me. The night before I left for college, Bella knocked on my door. She was 15 now, beautiful and graceful, still the centre of our parents' universe. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, continuing to pack. She sat on my bed, watching me fold clothes with the same methodical precision I brought to everything. "You're really going all the way across the country," she said. "Yes." "That's so far." "That's the point." Silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, "Are you mad at me?" I stopped packing and turned to look at her. Really look at her. She was a child still, for all her talent and accomplishments. She hadn't asked to be the favourite. She hadn't conspired to steal our parents' love. She had simply existed, had been talented and beautiful and everything they wanted, and they had chosen her. Over and over and over, they had chosen her. But she wasn't the one who had failed me. Not really. No, I said, and I meant it. I'm not mad at you. Then why does it feel like you hate us? I don't hate anyone, Bella. I just don't need you anymore. Her face crumpled slightly. What does that mean? It means I've learnt to be okay on my own. It means I don't expect things from people who can't give them to me. It means I'm free. That sounds lonely. I smiled, a small, sad expression that felt ancient on my 18-year-old face. Maybe, but it's better than the alternative. She left without understanding, and I didn't try to explain further. Some lessons couldn't be taught, only lived. The next morning, I loaded my car, a used sedan I'd bought with my own money, and prepared to leave. Mum and Dad stood on the front lawn, waving, their faces arranged in expressions of appropriate parental pride. Bella stood between them, smaller somehow than she'd seemed the night before. Call us when you get there, Mum said. Study hard, Dad added. We love you, they said together, and I wondered if they even believed it themselves. I drove away without looking back. College was exactly what I needed. I thrived in the independence, in the opportunity to be seen for my own merits, rather than constantly measured against my sister's shine. I made friends who knew nothing about my family, who liked me for who I was, rather than accepting me as Bella's less interesting older sister. I called home once a month, brief conversations that covered nothing of substance. Mum always sounded distracted. Dad always seemed to be in a hurry. Bella was always busy with some competition or performance or award ceremony. I visited twice in 4 years. Once for Christmas, my freshman year, once for Bella's high school graduation. Both times I felt like a stranger in the house where I'd grown up. They had moved to a bigger house when I was away, had redecorated and rearranged their lives around Bella's needs. There was a trophy room now, filled with evidence of her accomplishments. There was no room for me, but I didn't need one anymore. In my final year of undergraduate studies, when I was 21 years old and preparing to apply to medical schools, I received a phone call from an unknown number. Is this Helena? A man's voice, official sounding. Yes. This is Dr. Morrison. I don't know if you remember me. I was your surgeon several years ago when you had the mass removed from your brain. My heart stuttered. Dr. Morrison, the surgeon who had operated on me in my first life, the one I'd never met in this timeline because I'd caught the tumour early. I remember, I said carefully, not clarifying which version of events I was remembering. I'm calling because I'm conducting a follow-up study on patients who had similar conditions. I see here that you had a much earlier intervention than we typically see. I was wondering if you'd be willing to participate in an interview about your experience. What would you want to know? Well, primarily, I'm interested in understanding what prompted you to seek medical attention so early. Most patients don't present symptoms until the growth is much more advanced. I thought about how to answer, how to explain that I had died once already, that I had lived through the nightmare of emergency surgery and lonely recovery, that I had been given an impossible second chance. I just knew something was wrong, I said finally. I listened to my body. And your parents? Were they supportive of seeking treatment? A laugh escaped before I could stop it, sharp and bitter. My parents weren't involved. I see. A pause. May I ask why not? Because they had other priorities. Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want you to know, Helena, that what you did, advocating for yourself at such a young age, pursuing treatment independently, that took remarkable courage. Many adult patients don't show that level of self-determination. Thank you, I said, and meant it. I see from your file that you're pre-med now. Planning to become a doctor yourself? Yes? Good. We need more physicians who understand what it means to fight for your own health when no one else will. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and stared at the wall for a long time. This was a conversation that had never happened in my first life. A consequence of my early intervention, of my refusal to wait for someone else to save me. I had saved myself, not just from the tumour, but from the slow death of waiting for love that would never come. Medical school acceptance letters arrived in the spring. I got into Johns Hopkins, my first choice. I called home to share the news, caught up in a rare moment of wanting them to be proud. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mum said, but her voice was distracted. "Listen, can I call you back? We're at one of Bella's performances and it's about to start." "Sure," I said. She didn't call back. I moved to Baltimore in the fall. Medical school was brutal, long hours, impossible amounts of information, constant pressure. But I loved it. I loved the challenge, the purpose, the feeling of building something meaningful with my life. I called home on holidays. The conversations grew shorter each time. Bella was 19 now, dancing professionally with a company in New York. From what I gathered in our brief exchanges, she was successful, admired, living the dream our parents had built for her. I was happy for her, genuinely happy. Her success didn't diminish me anymore because I had learned to measure my worth by my own standards, not by comparison to her shine. The call came during my second year of medical school, on a random Tuesday in March. The same month, I realised with a strange sense of symmetry when I had died in my first life. "Helena?" Mum's voice was strained, unfamiliar. "Something's happened." My heart clenched, despite years of carefully constructed emotional distance. "What's wrong?" "It's Bella. She was in a car accident. She's okay, she's alive, but..." A sob broke through. "Her leg. The doctors are saying she might not dance again." I stood in my apartment, phone pressed to my ear, and felt the universe shift around me. This hadn't happened in my first timeline. This was new, a consequence of some butterfly effect from my changes, some divergence I had created by choosing differently. "Where are you?" I asked. "Mount Sinai, in New York. Would you come?" Would I come? After everything. After being ignored and dismissed and forgotten. After raising myself. After learning to need nothing from them. They were asking if I would come. I thought about saying no. I thought about how satisfying it would be to tell them I had other priorities, to let them feel what I had felt all those years ago sitting in a pre-op room alone. But I wasn't them. I would never be them. "I'll be there as soon as I can," I said. The drive to New York took 6 hours. I walked into the hospital with the strange dual perspective of someone who had been a patient here in another life, who knew the smell of antiseptic and the sound of monitors, who understood on a visceral level what Bella must be feeling. My parents were in the waiting room, holding each other. They looked older than they should, worn down by fear. When they saw me, Mum's face crumpled with relief. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." I looked around. "Where is she?" "In surgery. They're trying to repair the damage, but..." Dad's voice broke. "They said even if they can fix the bone, the soft tissue damage is severe. She might walk, but dancing at a professional level..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I sat down next to them, and we waited. Hours passed in the strange suspended time of hospital waiting rooms, where minutes feel like hours and hours disappear like minutes. Finally, a surgeon emerged. Young, female, competent-looking. She explained the procedure, the prognosis, the long road of physical therapy ahead. Bella would walk. She would heal. But her dancing career, as they had known it, was over. Mum sobbed. Dad sat in stunned silence. And I felt an unexpected twist of grief. Not for the loss of Bella's dance career, but for what this would do to all of them. Their entire family structure had been built around Bella's talent. Without it, who would they be? "Can we see her?" I asked. The surgeon nodded. "She's in recovery. 2 visitors at a time." "You 2 go," I said to my parents. "I'll wait." They didn't argue. They disappeared down the hallway, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Bella was awake when I finally entered her room an hour later. She looked small in the hospital bed, pale against white sheets, her leg elevated and wrapped in surgical dressings. Our parents had finally been convinced to get coffee, to eat something, to take a break. She turned her head when I entered and her eyes filled with tears. "Helena," she whispered, "you came." I pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down. "Of course I came." "I'm sorry," she said, and the words rushed out like she'd been holding them in. "I'm so sorry for everything. For all those years, for every time Mum and Dad chose my stuff over yours, for your surgery that I—" She stopped, confusion crossing her face. "Wait, did you even have surgery? I remember something about that, but I can't—" "I handled it," I said simply. "It was fine." "Nothing was fine," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was a selfish kid, and they let me be selfish, and you just disappeared. And now I'm the one in a hospital bed, and you're here, and I don't deserve—" "Stop," I said gently. "You were a child, Bella. You didn't do anything wrong. You were talented, and they loved that about you. That's not a crime." "But you were alone." "I was, but I learned something important from being alone. I learned that I could survive. I'd survive it. I learned that I didn't need their validation to have value. I learned to save myself." She stared at me, this young woman who had lost the thing that defined her entire existence, who was facing a future she'd never imagined. "How do you do that?" she asked. "How do you learn to save yourself?" I thought about that morning in my 12-year-old body, waking up with adult memories and impossible knowledge. I thought about every choice I'd made differently, every moment I'd chosen self-preservation over the desperate hunger for love. I thought about the long, lonely process of becoming someone who didn't need anyone. "You start by accepting that no one is coming to rescue you," I said. "And then you decide to rescue yourself anyway." Bella was quiet for a long time, then, "I don't know how to be anything except a dancer." "Then you'll learn. The same way I learned to be okay without them. The same way anyone learns to rebuild after their world falls apart. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one small act of courage at a time." "Will you help me?" she asked, her voice small and scared and more genuine than I'd ever heard it. I know I don't have any right to ask, but yes, I said, surprising myself. "I'll help you." Our parents returned eventually. They hovered around Bella's bed, grief-stricken and lost. They didn't seem to know what to say to either of us. Over the following weeks, as Bella recovered and began the grueling process of physical therapy, something shifted in our family dynamics. Mum and Dad seemed to wake up from a 20-year trance, seemed to suddenly see the imbalance they had created, the daughter they had neglected. They tried to apologize. Awkward, stumbling attempts to explain or justify or seek forgiveness for years of casual cruelty masquerading as normal parenting. I listened to their apologies with the same calm detachment I'd brought to everything else. I didn't tell them it was okay, because it wasn't. I didn't tell them I forgave them, because forgiveness required an emotional investment I no longer wanted to make. But I also didn't rage or blame or demand anything from them. I had learned that lesson long ago. The only person responsible for my well-being was me. "I appreciate you saying this," I told them one evening when they cornered me in Bella's hospital room, their faces arranged in expressions of remorse. "But I want you to understand something. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt. I'm just separate." I built a life without you, and it's a good life. I don't need you to validate it or apologize for not being part of it. But we want to be part of it now, Mum said, her eyes red from crying. We want to do better. That's good. Bella's going to need you to do better. She's going to need you to love her for who she is, not for what she accomplishes. She's going to need you to be actual parents instead of talent managers. And what about you? Dad asked quietly. What do you need from us? I considered the question. What did I need from these people who had given me life but not love? Who had provided shelter but not security? Who had been present but not engaged? Nothing, I said finally, and it was the truth. I don't need anything from you anymore. And that's not said with anger or spite. It's just a fact. I learned to meet my own needs a long time ago. That's so sad, Mum whispered. No, I corrected gently. It's liberating. Bella recovered slowly. Her leg healed, though her doctors confirmed what they'd initially feared. She would walk normally eventually, but the specific demands of professional dance were beyond what her rebuilt leg could withstand. I watched her grieve the loss of her identity, watched her struggle with the question of who she was if she wasn't Bella the dancer. It was painful to witness, but necessary. She needed to learn what I had learned at 12, that your value couldn't rest on anyone else's perception of you, not even your own perception of your talents. I visited when I could, though medical school limited my time. I called regularly, I listened when she needed to talk. But I also maintained my boundaries, my separateness, my carefully constructed independence. One afternoon, about 6 months after the accident, I found Bella sitting in the hospital's physical therapy room, crying quietly while she watched other patients work. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting beside her. "I'm jealous," she admitted. "Of you." "Of me?" "You know who you are. You've always known. You didn't need dance or Mom and Dad's approval or anything external to define you. You just are, complete in yourself. And I'm just now realizing I have no idea who I am without the thing I've lost." I understood what she was saying. In a strange way, our parents' neglect had been a gift. It had forced me to become self-sufficient, to build my identity from internal resources rather than external validation. "You'll figure it out," I said. "It'll be hard and painful and you'll feel lost for a while, but you'll figure it out." "How do you know?" "Because you have something I didn't have." "What's that?" "Time," I said simply. "You're only 19. You have your whole life to discover who you are beyond what you can do. I had to learn it while dying alone in a hospital room, while being ignored and dismissed and forgotten. Your path is different. Harder in some ways because you have to grieve what you've lost, but also easier because you're learning this lesson while you're still young enough to do something with it." She looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than her years. "Do you ever regret not telling them how much they hurt you, not making them understand?" I thought about the first timeline, about dying alone while they watched Bella dance. I thought about being 12 again with full knowledge of what would come. I thought about every choice I'd made to protect myself, to build a life independent of their love or approval. "No," I said, because telling them wouldn't have changed anything that mattered. They still would have been who they were. I still would have needed to become who I am. The only difference would be that I'd have wasted energy trying to make them understand something they weren't capable of understanding. That seems so lonely. It was lonely, I acknowledged, but it was also powerful. I learned that I could rely on myself. That's worth something. Bella nodded slowly, then hesitantly. "Will you teach me how to be okay alone?" I smiled, a real smile this time, warm with something that might have been sisterly love. "You're not alone," Bella. You have mum and dad, and they're trying to do better. You have friends, a support system. You don't need to learn to be alone the way I did. But what if I want to? What if I want to know that I can be okay, even if everything else falls apart? I looked at this young woman who had lost the thing she thought defined her, who was asking me to teach her the hard lessons I'd learned through necessity and pain. And I realised that maybe this was the point of it all. Not revenge or justice or even understanding, but this moment of connection between two sisters who had finally found a way to see each other. Okay, I said, I'll teach you. Years passed. I graduated from medical school and started my residency. Bella went back to school, studied physical therapy, found a way to stay connected to movement and healing, even though she couldn't dance professionally anymore. Our parents tried to rebuild relationships with both of us, with mixed success. I remained independent, self-sufficient, complete in myself. But I also learned to open small doors, to let people in selectively, to accept that being alone and being strong weren't always the same thing. I never told them about the first timeline, about dying alone while they celebrated Bella's recital. I never explained that I'd lived through their neglect twice, that I'd been given an impossible second chance and used it to save myself. Some stories didn't need to be told. Some lessons didn't need to be explained. Some pain didn't need to be shared to be valid or meaningful. On the anniversary of my surgery, both the one that had happened in my first life and the one I'd prevented in my second, I drove to the hospital where it all began, not to visit anyone or for any particular reason, just to sit in the parking lot and remember. I remembered being 18 and alone, and so desperate for love that I'd allowed myself to be erased. I remembered being 12 and determined never to need anything from anyone again. I remembered all the moments in between, the small victories, the quiet growth, the steady accumulation of self-worth that had nothing to do with anyone else's perception of me. My phone rang. Bella's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," I answered. "Where are you? I made dinner." "Well, I attempted dinner. It might be terrible, but I made enough for two if you want to come over." I smiled. Bella had her own apartment now near the physical therapy clinic where she worked. She'd built a life beyond dance, beyond our parents' expectations, beyond the identity that had been chosen for her before she was old enough to choose for herself. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. "Bring wine. We're going to need it to get through whatever I've created in here." I hung up and sat for another moment in the parking lot, in the place where one version of my life had ended and another had begun. Then I started the car and drove toward dinner with my sister, toward connection I'd chosen, rather than connection I'd been denied. The past was behind me, both versions of it. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities I was building with my own hands. And the present was mine, entirely and completely mine. I was free, not because they had finally seen me or loved me the way I'd needed, not because I'd gotten revenge or justice or even understanding, but because I had learned the most important lesson of all. I was enough. I had always been enough. I didn't need anyone to tell me that for it to be true. I drove away from the hospital without looking back, toward a dinner that might be terrible, with a sister who had learned to see me, in a life I had built from nothing but determination and the quiet, steady knowledge that I could save myself. And that, in the end, was more than enough.